fine. So they were just little itty bitty, so like they bounced and everything. So they were boy girl. Yeah, no, they used to call them bears. That's why I was after like 1 year hockey player.
No. Riverton is where I work. No. I'm with MORC, Minnesota Office Center. Yeah. Riverton is a nonprofit that does community housing.
All right.
Minnesota.
Real cheap.
Housing. It's all cooperative, so we have 7 properties around the university. That keeps me busy.
Oh. Snuck in there.
Yeah, they are. Everyone's here. The funny thing is because it's you as a renter are actually considered an owner. So they don't get CRP, they get, property tax savings, which.
Where's the frogs? How sweet is that?
Thank you everyone for coming. Nice little group we got here tonight, and we've got a full agenda, so let's get started here. Gordy is going to be here. He's just going to be running a little bit late, so but let's just get started. So first up is we have some guest presenters here, all the way from Joshua's all the way from Baxter, Minnesota. And Gunnar, thanks for coming down, both you guys. We have a good opportunity to meet from, or to hear from these guys who are well experienced in creating some mountain biking trails in Minnesota. Have lots of good experience. And Rick, I don't remember what the connection is or how you guys met them.
I'll do that as part of the intro.
Okay, but we're fortunate to have them here, and there's some growing need and interest in some mountain biking trails around here. So we thought we would tap into the people who experts here, so we do it right if and when that comes up in the future. So go ahead, Rick.
Okay, so I'm going to do a brief introduction, then I'm going to introduce Gunnar, who as a guest we can introduce to him, a short presentation, and then I'll turn it back to you and you can decide what you want to do with the Q&A, because this is very introductory. So just a little bit of context for people. The Orono Youth Mountain Bike Team used to practice at the Orono High School until the rec center was built. So then they moved over about 5 or 6 years ago to Deerwood Park, riding between the fields. And we've done such a good job in maximizing the use of that park that there's not a lot of room left. So we talked 2 years ago about 2 things. One, the possibility of them using a corner of the park that is wooded, which we approved and said they could do. And then we also talked, and I'm guessing some people might be here for this, about the possibility of doing biking in Lowry Woods, which we vetted and decided was not appropriate. So since then, there's been a lawsuit filed, so they're not using the woods in Deerwood, but they do continue to use the space between the parks. So our Trails Committee, I'm the chair of the Trails Committee, one of our goals is to find a place in the city of Orono for the youth to mountain bike safely, and we have no idea where that's going to be. Honestly, we don't have locations. I did some research by talking to some of the other cities that have done. People probably remember the bike trails the trails called Lone Lake in Minnetonka. It was fairly controversial, took a long time, so I spent a lot of time talking to staff, and they directed me to the Minnesota Off-Road Cycling, who I know very well. I'm an avid mountain biker and use MORC all the time to help us decide where to go and whether the trails are open. And they do a really good job of helping cities understand what it means to consider the possibility of this. So they're here just as an introductory. I'm seeing the same thing you're all seeing for the first time, and give us a chance to ask questions, and then our committee will kind of take it into consideration. If we decide to move forward, we'll come back. So, Gunnar Carlson, president of MORC.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, my name
train is gonna cross, and I had a shorter drive, I just come from the city, so a little easier for me. But MORC stands for Minnesota Off-Road Cyclists, but I'm just gonna refer to it as MORC, that's what we call it. Most of the mountain biking or off-road cycling associations, you're either gonna find that they're orcs or orcas, they're all, yeah, OCAs. At any rate, MORC has been around since 1994. We started really before that, probably about 35, 40 years ago was when the original volunteers were kind of together. They were called the Blast back then, I want to say. And that was at the River Bottoms. And the Minnesota River Bottoms was where we started, 1994. Here we are 30 years later. We currently have relationships with over a dozen land managers across 16 trails. And MORC doesn't own any of the land that we operate on. We just manage trail in a sustainable and a good way, and we manage the volunteer system that manages that trail for the landowners and the land managers. So, and we have a formal relationship with each of those land managers that is known as either an MOU or an MOA. So that's a memorandum of use or a memorandum of agreement. And that is the formal document that lays out what we can and can't do. That generally gives you like a trail corridor. So once you lay out the trail, you will have a corridor that where you're allowed to work. And if you needed to deviate from that at all, you have to come back together and get approval for that. Otherwise, what that does is it allows those volunteers to continue to work and adapt to the needs of, we're dealing with natural surface, right? So the most common thing is like a down tree. So if you get a report of a down tree, this allows for the group to go out there, take care of that down tree, get rid of the safety hazard without needing to call the city, call, you know, city manager, someone, and say, can we have permission to do this, da, 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 da. Currently, some of the land managers that we're working with would be Three Rivers Park District. U.S. Fish and Wildlife we just signed with actually this past year, and that's the Minnesota River Bottoms. So for the first time in 30 years, we actually will have an official agreement. It's just kind of been an understanding for the entire time of this organization. So that's very exciting. As Rick had said, City of Minnetonka, City of Bloomington, the City of Lake Elmo. And those are just a few of the partners that we work with. So we span across federal, state, local agencies, city governments, different trails organizations, and we work with them all and have managed to make those relationships work. MORC doesn't lobby for new trails, so we come into this situation when a group of local volunteers decides that they want a trail and they've already worked out all of that. So this isn't the kind of thing where MORC would come in and say, this is a great spot, or we want to do this here. That's not what we do. When a local group decides that they want a trail, we really come in and say, okay, we want to make sure you do this right. And so we have all the expertise, the experience. We do have training that we do, and then we have that volunteer management. So Minnetonka, like you were talking about Lone Lake Park, they have had over 200 volunteers last year, and they manage all that using some software and a good group of core volunteers that work that. And then the other big thing that we do is trail status reporting, like Rick talked about. So when there's rain or any kind of inclement weather, we close the trails down. We have an app and a system we use from our website that we use that. So all of our members and roughly 70,000 riders throughout wherever they are will access that information and know this is open, this is closed. Many of those trails will then have gates, and part of that agreement with cities is our volunteers can go and open and close those gates. So we can react a little faster maybe than city staff can sometimes. So we can get them closed and make sure that people at least know they should be off that trail when it's not a good time to be riding. And then beyond that, you know, we as MORC, we do provide the tools and the proper training to use them along with that volunteer management. So we're able to take on that fiscal responsibility of getting the tools, getting the materials. The big thing we're doing right now, winter riding is becoming very popular. So we are actually, as an organization, buying the snowmobiles and the snow machines that are needed and getting the drags fabricated to actually make that trail. And then our volunteers go out and do that, usually within about 4 to 6 hours of daylight. I've got a couple of volunteers that go out with headlamps on and everything and do it in the dark. But that's how all that, if you winter ride at all on any of the MORC trails, that's all done by volunteers. At an average of about 3 to 6 hours to do a trail, depending. But MORC is actually purchasing all of that equipment, and so we own it, we maintain it, which is a pretty big deal for us, and we're pretty excited about that. And then I just wanted to say, as I've been listening to some of the talk here, and small trails tend to be for local use, so smaller systems, we see throughout the MORC system, that smaller systems don't tend to attract regional use. They tend to be more for local use around where they are. Whereas some of our bigger trail systems within MORC, when you get over about 8-10 miles, then you'll see people coming from all over. But if it's smaller than that, it tends to be more local use and have less traffic on it. And then finally, I would just say, depending on where you're looking at and what you're looking at, we call it mountain biking, but let's be honest, there's no mountains around here. So we don't have a lot of altitude or transition here. We kind of have to build that or make that. And we do that through things like skills parks, and those are opportunities for new riders to practice and what we call progress or progression. And they can do that safely and do that in a good way for them to learn the skills they need to go out to some of the more advanced trails. And it also allows for the entire family to enjoy the activity. It's not uncommon if you go to Cottage Grove Bike Park, which is one of our places, to see mom or dad sitting on a bench watching kids who are doing crazy stuff here and there. Or actually, one of the things I saw when I was at an event at Cottage Grove Bike Park, they have a paved pump track, which is just a lot of these loops and it's just kind of up and down undulating. And there was a mother there with her son who's in a wheelchair, like a mobility chair, and she pushed him for, I don't know, it was over an hour. I mean, she was sweating. And I went and asked if she wanted me to step in and help, and she was like, no, this is actually giving me so much joy because it's one of the only times I've ever seen him get to play with kids his age, and so she just kept going. And that pump track, that paved pump track is what allowed that to happen. And those kind of things, skills parks and paved pump tracks, don't require a huge footprint to make. There is a bit more of an investment, but you don't need as much space to make those happen. So as you think about this and as you look at some of, consider some things, those are some things where MORC has experience and has some history of all those types of amenities to put into one of these areas, and those are the kind of things I think where we could be helpful to you. So I'm gonna leave it at that and I ask any questions, and I'll let Josh go ahead and introduce himself and give you a little more information.
Thank you. My name is Joshua Rebennack. I'm going to give a very short little resume here so you just know kind of my connection to all of this. I've worked 25 years in the civil and environmental engineering field, and I've designed over 17 miles of hiker-biker trails that have been built here in Minnesota. And I've also written multiple environmental assessments and environmental assessment worksheets, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. And I'm also involved with rewilding and preservation, various organizations here in the state, as well as I have traveled across the country to help teach a little bit about what we do here in Minnesota to other places. Again, I'll discuss that here in a minute. So let's kind of do a little definitions here. When we talk about urban trails or urban trails for mountain biking, what do we really mean? What we mean is we just mean trails that are open legally for access by mountain bikes that happen to occur inside the municipality lines of a city. Pretty simple. Across the entire nation, there's about 3,000 miles of these trails, and they are in every form of property you can imagine. So urban wildernesses, preserves, natural areas, parks, everything you can imagine. I would consider that the modern era of urban mountain biking kind of started with the Knoxville Urban Wilderness in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Lebanon Hills here in Minnesota. There's a reason why I say that. It's too long to get into right now. Minnesota in total has about 13 to 14% of the total mileage in the state, or in the country, which means we by far have the most amount of urban trails nationally. And because of that, we are considered a bit of a leader in the field, but not just because of the amount of mileage that we have, but because of our process. Gunnar talked a little bit about it. It's a very bottom-up, citizen-focused process. Citizens desire this, they go to the city and those citizens talk to an organization like MORC or COGS in Duluth or the crew where I'm at. We help them sort of go through the process. The result is we make things fit local parks here in Minnesota. We don't try to come in and impose anything. So it fits your park, it's your people, but ultimately they learn best practices from those that know it. We have managed in Minnesota for the last 20 years to create trails all over the place with very minimum environmental impacts. Again, we are considered a leader in that regard. And in fact, Minnesota hosts a lot of people from other parks departments across the country who come here to learn how we do this. I don't know about Gunner, but myself, I have had people from Scappoose, Oregon, Rockford, Illinois, Elizabethtown, New Jersey, who came here specifically to learn how we do this. And we have this 20-year-long history. So I think, I can't speak for Gunner, but I would say, look at our history and what we've been able to do in the state of Minnesota. It's really positive. That kind of brings me to kind of the idea of trail guidelines. So what do I mean by that? Well, all the trails in Minnesota that are built new are built to a set of guidelines. And here's that book from the Minnesota DNR. It's quite a big, thick one. This guideline was adopted in 2007 by the Minnesota DNR. It places mountain bike trails and trails for hiking as the same category of trail. And that book is based on this one from 2004 from the International Mountain Biking Association. They took this book and made their trail guideline. So when we talk about trails, we're ultimately talking about trails that are built to a standard that was designed for mountain bikes. If you took the DNR book and went out in your backyard and made a hiking trail per this book, you're making a mountain bike trail per this book, you just don't know it. So, that vast amount of knowledge that we got from DNR here is really based upon some really structured science behind it. I happen to have brought tonight this review of ecological effects of mountain bikes from 2010 from Parks Canada. That's the federal park system in the country of Canada. The bibliography on this thing is 16 pages long. That was 12 years ago. I can tell you that bibliography would be 2 or 3 times that length now. So that brings me to the questions about environmental review here in Minnesota. Those are controlled under the Minnesota Environmental Protection Act of 1973, and that set up 2 levels of environmental review. The first is called an Environmental Assessment Worksheet, often called an EAW. And if your impacts are high enough in an EAW, you then qualify for what's called an Environmental Impact Statement, EIS. You've probably heard those 2 sort of acronyms before. So, that is separate from whatever permits you'd have to get. So, if you need a stormwater permit, or there's a creek crossing, so you have to get a watershed district, that is not considered an environmental review. That is just a permit you need to get. There may be rules to that permit, things you gotta do, such as a wetland permit. You gotta go get a wetland delineation as an example, but those are not environmental reviews. Those permits are extremely focused. You're not gonna get a permit for instance, stormwater that's gonna have you look for critters. It's just gonna be on stormwater. So, what does Minnesota say about environmental review for EAWs? What's the threshold for trails? I'm going to read it directly from the book here because I think it's the best way to put this. And this is 4410.4000 subsection 37A. Constructing a trail at least 25 miles long on forested or naturally vegetated land for recreational use. So that's the minimum number that you would need to create to trigger an EAW. Now, you could have other things that go along with that trail. Wetland fill, it's part of a larger project. It's a phased project that may qualify. But for trail alone, if you do under 25 miles, there's no environmental review. So what about a discretionary EAW from the city? Any city per this act can decide to do one just for the heck of it. There is no minimum standard. The city could go, great, we're going to do this, but we're going to do an EAW first. And any of the rules regarding the size of any impact no longer apply. So what about a citizen petition? Because this is another thing that's in that Act of 1973. That would be up to the city to adopt it, go forward with the EAW, or to reject it. Here's the thing though, if you look at that act and its requirements, in order for what they call the RGU, that's the city, to accept to do an EAW, there has to be evidence that that EAW would be warranted. I can tell you, you're probably not going to find much evidence for that. And the reason is because trails are considered one of the lowest impact park infrastructure that you can create. There's been some discussion earlier about experiences at Lone Lake Park. As many of you know, Lone Lake Park went to the city rejected the EAW, it then was litigated. I don't know if anyone's ever had a chance to read the court's opinion in that particular discussion, but the persons who asked for that EAW had a professional firm give them help as for the evidence of getting one, and the court denied it rather briskly because they were not able to provide the evidence. So does that mean the city can just do whatever the heck it wants? No. You're going to have to go through the permitting, as I said. I happen to be one of those people who recommend an EA whenever you do anything in a park. So I want to take a moment to explain an EA versus any other regulatory document.
Hey Josh,
Yeah?
I'm kind of pushing up against our time, so.
Oh, yep.
Yeah,
I'm almost done, I promise. An EA is a voluntary document. There is no sort of limit on those. There's no legal requirements. What you have to do, the bonus about that is it lets you talk about what you need to in that document and leave off what you don't. To do them, they're actually relatively cheap, and I do recommend those for most parks as a voluntary thing. But by law, anything less than 25 miles, there is no requirement, just the permit. So thank you.
thank you. So I have one question, and I'll turn it over to you. So, to the extent you know about what we're up to, Gunnar, what do you think is the next step for us? We have a perceived need, we have interest, we don't have any identified sites, we don't have a formal group of volunteers, we have the team. Do you have any just general suggestions for us as a park commission?
So from MORC's perspective, getting that group of volunteers together and having that group of volunteers that you know is going to be there from day one is pretty key.
Okay.
We have some new trail with one of our land managers right now where that core group that was identified early has kind of fallen apart, and now the trail is open and we're at a critical moment. So that group is important and necessary from day one. It also is helpful because they can start getting their training and get onboarded in the sense of like maybe learning some best practices, these books, doing some of that, so that the moment you're done, you're ready to go. The other piece is if you're going to use one of Minnesota's fine professional builders, if you were to call them today, you might get building in 12 to 18 months, but you're probably not going to be on next season.
Right.
Of course, if you're willing to pay for it, you might get prioritized. We don't know how that works, but you really do have to think a bit ahead if you have some professional stuff you want done. So getting them involved in the process earlier is always better. They will also be able to tell you what's feasible. If you were to look at, one thing they do that I can't even do is look at some of the areas. So if you have prospective areas you're looking at, share that with them. Pay the little bit for the consultation, share the areas with them, and see what kind of plans they would come up with. Because one, you'll be amazed at what they can do to maximize the space, and two, I think that might help provide some clarity for you as a working group and as a city to be able to make the most informed decision you could.
Perfect, thank you.
I have a question. Is there a sort of a minimum acreage for a minimum viable trail?
the engineer have a different answer for me. So as an organization, MORC doesn't usually like to get involved if it's under like 5 miles. And the reason for that has a lot more to do with the volunteers feeling bored. But there are things that have changed that perspective over time, like skills parks and some of these features and things that have come out. So, you know, Cottage Grove Bike Park is tiny. It's literally in one of the city parks in Cottage Grove. And it is a small dirt track but they have a whale tail, which is this insane thing I won't go off. That is a big jump, and there's kids flying around and doing wild stuff there, doing things I can't do. But then you have that pump track off to the side for what we call the little shredders, the little strider bikes. See a lot of strider bikes racing. That park has such a dedicated group of volunteers that really we don't see those same issues of like them asking to be able to do more or wanting to expand more. So at this point, no, I really leave it up to the designers, and it comes down to water management. You know, one of the biggest things we have when we build trail is where's the water gonna go? And it has to be able to shed naturally and responsibly, or you're gonna end up having trail that can't dry out or holds water, and if that happens, then erosion happens, and we all know that's bad, right? Like, so that is what it comes down to. But what they've been able to do, and Josh could probably speak to this better, in the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, in terms of management of watershed, is quite amazing to me when you see how trail doubles back on itself and where it goes and what they're able to do. So you're not constrained in the same way at all.
Other questions?
I have one. What other communities around here are you already operating in?
Oh boy.
Do you have a map that we can see?
Yes, if you go on the website, you can see the map. You might be able to pull it up, but you can see all the trails listed. If you go to morcmtv.org, you can see all the trails listed. You know, we're up in Elm Creek. You're out in, I mean, we go all the way up to Monticello. Yeah, Rockford, Elk River. I mean, the Elm Creek Park Reserve is probably the closest to here, and that's
the closest.
probably.
Monarch.
Yeah, Monarch. Yeah, that's true.
Where is it?
Carver Park,
Oh,
Yeah.
pretty close.
Yeah, I suppose it would be.
Like, we're kind of in I drive 20 to 25 minutes to maybe 8 different trails.
Yeah, you really, the beauty of MORC's trail system is, okay, so I live North Minneapolis, just by Robbinsdale there. From me, it's probably within like 40 minutes I could get to basically everything that we have. So if you're on one edge of the Twin Cities and you wanted to get to the furthest out west here, it's probably an hour, but it's not that bad. Yeah, so here's the list of trails where we're at. And so you're gonna go as far down south as, I guess Woodbury or Eden, kind of that area. And then you head up north, yeah, I guess maybe Elk River would be as far as you're gonna get. And then over east, you get into Battle Creek, and that's, you know, in the Battle Creek Park over there in St. Paul. That probably has our most elevation to play with for the Twin Cities.
You can download an app, a free app called Trail Forks, and then you'll see them all on a map super close to the Twin Cities.
So the closest one is in Carver.
Yeah.
So how would that work then if this trail system were built here and volunteers signed up, this sort of thing, would that connect then to other?
Our trails don't necessarily connect to each other. No.
Oh, okay, so it's not.
They all operate independently, maybe a little more siloed than I personally, as the leader of the organization, would like, but they really don't cross. And part of the reason for that is you have really localized conditions. And so like what I always say is like people out here in the western suburbs, you're dealing with different dirt than like they are over at just on the east side. It's different. And if you go up by where Josh is from, very different. There's a lot of iron ore in that, you go right to red. Their stuff dries out really quickly. Like I'm jealous of, they can open their trails in 2 hours after a good rain. We probably need a day and a half before most things are gonna open around the Twin Cities. And so
So you're not connected to the loose line at all, or other bikes?
some stuff is connected, and Three Rivers may concentrate more on like, hey, do you guys wanna see if we can make this connection? But that is not a priority for us. And quite frankly, in terms of safety, from an organization, trail crossings that's a chance for danger. We prefer not to have as many trail crossings. So we don't want to build our trail system. Maybe you want the trail system to fork off from one of those main trails. And as bike packing becomes a bigger thing, that has become a focus for Three Rivers Park District. And so you can go to a few of the parks out west here and bike pack in. I don't know how familiar anyone is with that, but that's the idea that you actually reserve a campsite, they're group campsites. You reserve your wood, everything, and all you have to do is what you carry on your bike. So you bring in your tent, you know, hot dogs, whatever, you know, but it's that kind of idea of like you bike in, you camp there. They'll bring you, you know, they'll have the water source and everything, and it's more of a group camp. And as that becomes more popular, I think we'll see more focus on connecting to some of those, you know, our great trail systems like the Leaf Line.
Do you run into any conflicts when you start a project like this in a community?
Yes. I think, you know, there's always fear of unknown, right? And I think when we talk about and we think about, one of the biggest things I hear is people worry, like, I don't want all these noisy, loud, crazy bikers there. So one of the things I might even have a recording on this phone. I like to go out for early morning walks with my dog through Theoworth, which is in Minneapolis, it's in the city, right? I can stand there and record, and I will hear squirrels going. Every once in a while, I'll hear the buzz of a hub from a bike, but that's it. It's not this, it's not like a Mountain Dew commercial, which I think is the image that a lot of people have, but it's not like, you know, if you watch some of the Red Bull stuff or something, like that's not what's happening. You know, the average age of our riders is going up and up and up right now, along with the high school kids that, you know, it's the second fastest growing sport in Minnesota. Just so you know, we're over 2,500 kids in the Minnesota Cycling League this year, grades 7 through 12, that were racing, and it's growing. So you have a lot of youth that want to do this and need more places to do this, but that's probably the biggest thing we hear is like there's all this concern about how much noise they're going to make and how much damage they're going to do to the park. And I think Lone Lake is the perfect example of, like I said, they had over 200 volunteers last year, and they did thousands of hours of work. And part of that MOU, they have invasive species remediation as a deal. So they have nights where they go do trail work that aren't even about building on the trail, it's about working in the woods that are around the trail, doing that invasive species removal and remediation, working with the city on that. Sometimes they might be planting saplings or doing other stuff, but they really do work together, and that's all part of that deal you can work out. And that crew actually really enjoys it. We were a little worried. It's the first time that we've had the invasive species language in a deal, and so to be quite honest, the board was concerned about what's this going to mean, and are we going to be able to maintain this volunteer crew? They're the largest volunteer crew we have for any trail. So you have a lot of people who may not, I think some of them don't even ride. They're there to do the other work, which is pretty cool. So that's probably the biggest thing, is just making sure that people understand that we're good neighbors and we want to stay good neighbors. Out at Sunfish Lake Park, I was talking about trail crossings, there were 17 of them there. That trail got built at the same time as a nature center and some other stuff, so you had all these user groups descend upon this park at the same time, and nobody, like none of them were established user groups, so nobody knew where each user group was gonna like to be. But we had all these trail crossings, dangerous, and then there's a great history and culture of ornithology out there, but the biggest complaint I would hear is, I'd hear from the bird watchers, yeah, I almost got hit by some idiot on his bike. And I'd hear from the mountain bikers, there was some idiot with binoculars not paying attention to where they were, standing in the middle of the trail. And so we all came together as a bunch of user groups and were able to say, what is the real problem here? And are the trails signed correctly? You know, do we need to work on reroutes? So we did some reroutes, we did new signage, we did all of this. MORC was able to come in, and the great thing is we had all these meetings and they were like, great, we can't pay for this. MORC was able to say, we'll cut the check. We paid for all those trail reroutes. We brought in stakeholders and partners that we have who donated in kind their time and their expertise to do all the work. We actually have one of the professional trail builders from Minnesota who said, yeah, I've got a couple weeks free. He rented the equipment for us personally, only charged us for the rental, and did all that work. So we were able to get it done at a price that we were able to afford, and then the city kicked in on some signage. Everybody's happy, and I'm not getting any more complaints about yahoos from either side, you know, so that's been a good thing. But we were able to come in and do that, and I think that requires meetings like this and going into the community and making sure people understand. But I think that you don't have to worry about most of those fears, and then I think on the other side, we spend a lot of time talking with people about the economic engine that mountain biking is. I mean, like I said, we probably have 70,000 plus people who are accessing our trail status reports and looking at that. Now, that doesn't mean they're all riding or that they're all actively looking at it, but that's a huge group of people, and so we know that on days when most of the southern trails are closed, but maybe Elm Creek's open, Elm Creek Brewing's quite happy, because where are you going after you bike? You're gonna grab a beer. You know, we're able to talk about some of these kind of things too, about where you can be strategic and really benefit your community in other ways as well.
I just want to add on to that. I think, as he said, the fear of unknown is always the question, and unfortunately, there are individuals who take that fear of unknown and amplify it, right? I call it pulling an Alex Jones. Maybe that's a bad way to put it, maybe it's not, but that's what it is. But what the thing I always tell people when they say, well, we're worried about this or we're worried about that, look at places that you want your park to be. And what I mean by that is, there's an example out there for every park. You were asking about size. The city of Buffalo has 2/3 of a mile and half a mile long trails and a couple 2-acre parcels. If that's all your park or your city can handle, that's a good place to go look at. If it's something bigger, there's a place that you can go look at. Don't assume you have to invent everything. Somebody's invented it for you. It's just going out and saying, what's working in your place, what's not working, how did you overcome this problem?
That's probably enough for today.
Yeah, that's enough. Anyone else have anything, any quick questions, or?
No, it was just really good to hear from both of you. You both are very passionate, I could tell, about trails, especially your books. So I think it's definitely good to learn and listen from you both, because you clearly have a lot of experience. And I like the idea of kind of looking at what trails exist and kind of seeing what, I say, options are out there, and then it kind of gives you a good visual of what, you know, you could maybe potentially see, you know.
I would also suggest, if you're looking at trails, look at Bentonville, Arkansas, and that's, we all know that's kind of like the shining example in the world right now. But Bentonville has really embraced it. They have a pump track on next to the sidewalks on the route to get from all the neighborhoods to the schools. So like kids are doing this on their way to school. It's amazing what they've done. And to what Josh was saying, like reimagining, well, is this usable space? Is this usable space? How can we maximize recreation for this here to go along with their, you know, trails in the woods and everything. So.
Thanks again for
Thank you very
coming
much.
in. This is
We'll report back.
Cool.
To you and we'll have you back.
Yeah, always available. If you need more, you know how to get hold of me.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick, for, this has been kind of a long time coming. We've talked about this for a couple months, having them in, so I'm glad that finally happened. This is, you know, you know, the trails here are great in Orono, and I think it's a great match.
Yep. Yeah, I'm pretty determined to flush this out. If it doesn't work for good reasons, that's okay. But if we can find a way to make it work, in particular because we're focusing on the youth team. So
Yeah.
we would be thinking about a smaller track that is more skills oriented, that can keep the kids in the community. So.
Cool.
It's a great thing.
Say, I know a lot of people that do that, it's fun for them. But, I must have missed something, but where in Orono are you anticipating this bike trail?
We started with that, I apologize. So we haven't even begun to ask that question yet. This was the starting point, to be able to say, what is it we would even look for? How would we begin? So
This is just kind of an educational thing, and I think that we have identified some people that can really help us if we wanted to head down that direction. So that's all it
So you
is.
don't have any idea where you put a trail?
correct, yeah, they wouldn't at all. It would be us and we don't either.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that kind of putting the cart before the horse kind of thing?
absolutely not. It seemed like this was absolutely, I started by saying, I apologize, I don't think you would come in and talk to a number of cities who had false starts and really felt like this was the place to start, to really get an understanding for what a trail even is and how other cities are doing it. So if we go to the next step to start talking about sites, everybody will know about it.
Well, they certainly know their business,
Yeah.
you know. It's just, I somehow anticipate a conflict of interest, depending on where you maybe decide you wanna put your trails. I'm assuming you need some high ground.
And it wouldn't be their.
Yeah, it's
not-
not, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not, that's not ours.
At this point, I would say we literally don't know if it's a park, a piece of land the city owns, or a piece of land the city doesn't own. So this was the first step, and you'll see the next steps forward.
And then I'll just say before I go, MORC is 100% volunteer. We have no paid staff. So just to be clear, like our entire board and everybody who's involved is a volunteer. Some people submit, reimbursements for their stuff.
Pretty much everyone, more the bike team, the park commissioners, we're all volunteers. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, have a good evening.
All right, next up on the agenda is Summit Beach update. Josh, do we have, okay, so, Victoria and Dan and myself, we're in the subcommittee here and wanted to give the rest of the commission an update of where we've been and where we're headed with this. We have had some very good discussions at our open houses that took place on August 13th and 17th. And we got some really good input, feedback through our online survey as well as through some discussions. So just kind of stepping back. So the first thing we did was we did an online survey number 1. And then we came up with survey number 2 that was online and in person that gave the residents some concepts, some ideas to react to in some pictures. We kind of did this format of do nothing, do something, and do more, and had some pictures associated with all 3 of them. And it was a great opportunity, at least, you guys chime in too, but Victoria and Denny, you guys, and Elisa were at some open houses. I thought it was a great way to open up a discussion around what people really want at Summit. So that's where we are so far, is that we've done 2 of these online surveys, and then we've had these open houses, and we're at a place right now where we're honing in on, I think, where we are going to end up for a draft master plan. The approach is a minimalist approach. That's what we've heard from all of our discussions is, and we can take you through each of the elements, but don't have a big building. But you know what, a small restroom might be appropriate for here. And so we can take you through kind of where we are right now. The next step is to get some feedback on where we're headed with the master plan, and then we'll move forward with finalizing the master plan. So we have another open house set for October 13th?
The 13th.
What is it?
The 13th.
October 13th.
Correct.
Yeah, in here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, where we'll give an opportunity to everyone to again give their feedback on what we're going. But the approach here was very much a funnel. We started out with broad questions about what, in general, what do you want? And then the next step was to hone in, okay, based on what we've heard, here's some concepts that we want to get some feedback on. And now the next step is we think we have heard where what people want and what makes sense for us. as a city, to recommend to move forward. So, if you go to the next slide, this kind of, there's a bunch of different elements of the park that we had discussions about. And, can we like zoom in and go
It's a little
from,
hard for,
yeah, go from like the top down or something? That would be great. Yeah, so, I guess in no particular order, on the left side, this is the stuff that we've heard, is to develop a replacement plan specifically on the hill area there, and that's just being responsible with the trees and make sure that we have we maintain this beautiful area for years to come.
We have quite a few ash trees on site as well,
Yeah.
so.
I was gonna say it's beyond the hill, because those ash trees are like right when you walk in,
Okay?
and they're kind of on the doorway saying goodbye,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, there's one ash tree right in the center, right? Right
Yeah,
in front
so-
of the
Yeah, so we
beach.
definitely should have a plan to slowly integrate new trees, so it's not. such a
Replacement
rush.
doesn't mean cutting it down and putting a new one in its place, it means going ahead and establishing trees right now. So once those do eventually fail, we'll have a decent sized tree in place.
Yeah.
We heard lots of good interest in a rink for the winter. I think it's a great location. We have, continuing on the left side, there's been a lot of interest in the swimming area and adding a swim platform, as well as some buoyed, roped in area. The concern is that we've heard that there's been boats and jet skis that come into that area. That is obviously a safety hazard, an environmental issue, and so forth. So we would kind of formalize the swimming area there, as well as then, well, I guess I'm jumping ahead, but formalizing the beach area, kind of having a more well-defined and a little bit expanded. We expanded it last year, but a little bit more expanded and defined beach area there. Replacing the picnic tables that are very old and very rusty and ugly with something that was a little bit more permanent and more usable. And then instead of having this ugly biffy, when you drive into the park there, and the first thing that you see is this biffy with the broken door that's forever open, that I keep telling Josh that we need to get fixed, and they fix it, and then it slams open again and breaks the spring. We would put a nice vault toilet there, similar to what you would see at Three Rivers, and similar to what we have on Big Island. That picture,
I don't like that picture.
don't like the picture, and it was
No.
too late, I guess, to
So
replace it, but
basically, think of a small vault toilet, which is not very large. It might be from here to here, and then you open up the back with a small bench where you put your skates on.
yeah, you basically
Super duper
extend,
small, that is not right.
you'd extend the roof line 10 feet and have some benches.
Probably even less than that would be probably much smaller. But, because we did get, I mean, I will say the one thing that was very eye-opening to me is that we had a lot of feedback where people came in very much hot for like not change anything, but after asking them, all right, so you have a Biff toilet here, do you want a Biff toilet now, or you want a vault toilet? Every one of them, I talked to, wanted a vault toilet versus a Biff. I don't blame them. And I would say that people wanted enhancements to the park, and when you really, that's not a good picture, so whoever put that on there needs to take it off. Little things like instead of a picnic table chained to a tree, we'd like something that's made out of natural stone that we don't have to chain to a tree. You see sitting stones on the right, that would be ideal. Little things that the neighbors really brought up, you know, another thing with the buoyed area is you have people fishing in the swimming area, which is a little tough for swimming children. So really drawing a line between swimmers and fishermen. So that's why there's the debate of the small dock, which would be off to the side somewhere. Additional canoe kayak racks, the current one's already full with the neighborhood's usage. So that would be a big benefit. So I think that's important. Like, I appreciated the open houses just to have that conversation, because I think once people were able to say, well, I mean, I didn't really think they'd want a skating rink, but now they want a skating rink, and then it became a warming house. One person started with do nothing and went all the way to pavilion. We're not doing a pavilion, just so we're clear. But I think it's just a really good, because I think once they understood that they're enhancements so that they can use it hopefully year round, right? And do other things and really be able, especially the one with the kid thing really kind of struck me as fishermen and jet skis driving up to fill their tanks up in a swim area is not cool at all.
The one last piece is the parking lot, which would not be expanded at all, but half of the current parking lot, we have, it floods every spring. Ever since the curb and gutter was put on the street, whatever the East Long Street, the water comes down and around and floods the parking lot. So we need to remedy that. Pave over half of the parking lot, like it's shown right there. Leave the rest of the parking lot as it is right now with the class 5 gravel. Put in a rain garden to catch all this water that's coming around the curb right there. And then also kind of on the left side there is right in front of the vault toilet, and we would put some plantings and so forth, so that when you drive into the parking lot, the first thing you see might be the toilet, but it's at least hidden a little bit with some vegetation.
Well, and the cool thing the engineer said is they thought they could put that on existing pavement already. So we're not
Yeah.
increasing the footprint, which was surprising and good to hear.
So it was a great experience to go through this, because I'm confident that where we're heading with this is the right thing to do. I don't know if.
Yeah, I think that the cool thing about the third open house is we got a lot of feedback. It was nice to have an example to see what it looks like. And now they can look a little bit deeper and say, oh, this is what, and see it all kind of together. The one caveat I would say is that even if everyone says, we love all these things, we will not be probably doing all these things next year, and it will probably be a very phased approach.
Yep.
So you might see next year like something that's very affordable in a new area, right? We can make that happen. I don't think we have it on their bike rack. That was another request, but like little things like we can, and I'll trust parks to figure that out, but like how do you phase it over time? I think it's probably okay.
Yeah, too, we have a 501c3, people want to make donations to for like the stone benches and all that kind of stuff, where you put plaques on, and they want to make a donation, have your name on them, that kind of stuff. City stones, the benches, all that stuff, so, don't forget about our, I guess we'll call it the city 501c3, even though the city is known, but they are kind of tied in to help our parks out, raising funds.
Jan, Rick, anything else from you guys?
One thing you forgot, the bottom right.
What?
The bottom right, because you can't see it.
Oh, the interpreter.
So we'll say, because I spend a lot of time going to Big Island Park, and I ask a lot of people about it, by far and away the most comments we get are about the interpretive signage. So I think making sure that we're telling the story, and we did really nice ones there, so I hope we'll do the same thing here.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So nothing set in stone, this is just what, minus the one picture. I don't mind. That will come to the third open house, so people will be able to give feedback, and we'll take notes on like, what do you think of this, is the right location, just to make sure we didn't miss anything. But in general, this was pretty much what everyone, well, not everyone, but I see the majority of people said, right? Pulling out the outliers of pavilions and whatnot.
Any questions from?
I do.
Yeah.
Do you have the stats from the survey as part of this?
So we're gonna share that in at the third open house, so we'll have some signs up that will actually talk about the Orono residents and response rates and whatnot. We just wanted, I think the idea was we wanted to give the Parks Board a first glimpse before we went to there, just so that you guys could see it.
So is this the right time?
I
to bring this
understand
question?
from this pictorial
Yeah.
here, this fairly outlines your vision for the modification of the Summit Park then. In these plans, it sounds like you're gonna try to be kind of minimalist and preserve the nature and scope of the original intent of the park to be a more or less nature, but yet you're conducive to people using it more fully. Am I also to assume also that the earlier intention for the Long Lake Rowing Club has been dropped permanently?
Well, I mean,
Let me say, there was no intention for the Long Lake Rowing Club,
So
first
there's
of all.
gonna be no
but
big
that
big
was-
building there, 8,000 square
that's not-
feet, destroying the whole context.
There's not going to be that. That was, the Long Lake Rowing Club asked us to consider it.
Uh-huh.
We didn't move it forward. They
So
dropped
this
their
minimalist
petition.
approach with basic but yet nice little amenities is your vision at this time.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
our vision
Yeah.
at the time, yep.
And you're not
and-
gonna be like cutting down a bunch of big mature trees and turning it into a massive parking lot or something.
Are we?
no, I mean,
No.
what you see out there is,
No, this is just, I'm just trying to grasp it.
yeah, no, it's a fair question, because I think, and I said this before, it's really frustrating for me watching social media where people talk about all the things that are completely inaccurate. This is what we heard from residents, that they wanted enhancements, right? So instead of a nasty toilet.
Yeah, I
they
like
want-
the minimalist approach.
So
I like
this is
the-
what this
Very
is what the plan is.
subtle, very simple, not getting carried away, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Trying to turn it into downtown Minneapolis with maybe a coffee shop and a bunch of other stuff.
You- If it was up to me, I'll tell you how I voted. I wanted a playground there. And that's not what we heard. And that's fine. So, we're not
And
gonna
when
put a
we
playground
originally-
there right now.
When we originally started looking at this, there was never any idea that we were gonna come in and do major changes. We
I
were
see.
just doing
Well, that's
upgrades
reassuring,
and meeting what needed to be taken care of. But we have never really looked at any big
Any
buildings.
plans at all to actually maybe even enhance the nature aspect of it by bringing in pollinators or, things that have kind of a soft touch too, maybe some pines or, you know what I mean?
I mean, if that comes out at the next open house as an item.
I would say come on the 13th.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff we're gonna talk
Details,
about
but-
Yeah.
on the
Yeah, because
13th.
the big nature push was that the hill with the trees, people were really specific about not wanting those to be cut down.
Right.
We're bringing up tree inventories for the whole thing because there's trees like ashes and whatnot that will probably, they don't have, right?
Yeah, some trees have no future.
Yeah, so can you create, an inventory where you slowly add trees in that when,
Right, this is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
If you're thinking beyond the moment into the future.
yeah, no, exactly, yeah, so that's, because we noticed, I think Brad and I noticed right away when we went there, the first thing you see are 2 ash trees right in front of the beach.
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, I have 2 ash trees I treat every year, hoping that works, I don't really know.
I know we planted some apple trees on our property, not even thinking, they're all dead now because the big trees took them off with shade and stuff, and it constant argument with the wife, no, you didn't water, no, there's no shade, you got the sun, I mean, that's typical.
Well, at least you didn't plant bucks.
After
Because that
45
was
years,
something we
I've
did out there
got
for a
nothing
while.
here, but no discussion, but anyway, yeah, fruit trees are nice, and my brother-in-law's involved in the lady slipper thing up north, if you ever heard of that project.
Oh, yeah.
He's involved in that, and you think a simple little concept like that would be a no-brainer, but constant meetings, I mean,
Really?
yes, and the amount of money involved, unbelievable, so,
Those lady slippers are expensive, I talked to
yeah.
some.
Well, I'm just trying to minimalist approach, because I did a lot of hunting when I was younger, okay, and the DNR has a way of squandering money, a lot of governments do, but the deal is, we used to just walk in, but they spent like $350,000, $400,000 to create a little parking lot, when it's in the middle of nowhere. It was a waste of DNR money, when they could have been buying up river bottom land on 2-to-1 with the government program and done a lot for the nature. Anyway, I
Okay.
got sidetracked for.
That's
forget
okay.
I said
No,
that.
that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
No.
Come to the October
Yeah,
13th
please
meeting.
do.
Yeah, do you guys, do you have a quick comment?
Yeah, so what I'm curious about, because I'm really excited to hear about all of this, like I'm just thrilled. And so I just wanna know how it's gonna be presented to the community so that people know about the October 13th meeting, like how it's gonna be run, and people have maybe a week or two notice.
Yeah, it's out on the website as of today.
Okay,
Published on our calendar or whatever. I'm sure that there's, I will email the friends of Summit Park group
okay, yeah.
and make sure that it's on their website or whatever as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good because, I mean, the reality is that a lot of people rely on that.
Yeah,
And, you know, I kind of took some notes, but I think that if you can say in there that, you know, to reiterate for some people maybe that have trouble trusting what happened, is just to say it was based on the survey, and the survey said, let's do minimalist, but let's correct, you know, improve some things and come to the meeting.
yeah,
And I think that it's a really good thing for the community.
yeah.
Can
So,
I just make one point? Can you go back one slide? Just, I'll probably get this wrong,
Yeah.
but essentially, there's one more open house, then we'll probably have it at a park commission meeting at least once. And
Well-
then we'll recommend it to the city.
That's what I was gonna say is,
You do that.
no offense to any, but things move not so fast, right? There's a lot of steps, right? And
Yeah,
so,
but just so people know, just
so
people
we
are-
have this open house, and then we're going to recommend it in the CIP. But this might come up again next year have to come up again next year in front of the commission, and then go to the city council when we have the plan defined, and we actually are asking for money to move forward at that point. So there's a lot of steps and a lot of opportunities for people to weigh in on this, so.
That's all I was gonna say. Come every time we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Whether it's an open house or a park commission meeting or a city council meeting, because the more people that come and say, you're on the right track, the quicker we'll be able to do it.
And not everything is going to be done it's gotta be phased,
Yeah.
so.
And know that it coming back up at parks and council isn't because it's a totally new thing, it's just those are the process.
That's the
It needs to
process,
take
yeah.
for it to even happen.
Well, I just have a feeling that there's probably still a lot of people that need to hear that there's not gonna be a building there.
Oh, I'm sure
And
there
that
is.
there's, you know, like, people, I think actually,
Spread the word.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll put something on, but, I just think people need a little bit more you know, they need to know that they can trust the process.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying today, I think will help them
Great.
know that, so the more you can get that out, I think it's good, but I'll put something on, because, you know, I go on and see.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else before because this is a good segue to the CIP discussion too.
Thank you for your service and doing such a nice thoughtful job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's look at Summit here. Where is it over there? At the top, okay.
This is the draft CIP, nothing is set.
Yeah, so, all right, so again, the CIP, thank you.
Sorry, fire getting that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I got so much time in there, got all these things going on.
Probably will.
Then you-
My husband's there.
Oh, actually, yeah, that's right.
That's nice.
Thanks for your hard work, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks.
So, as a reminder, the CIP process is that we need to make a recommendation, formal recommendation at our next meeting, the November meeting, okay? As I look at where the CIP stands right now, I know that it's not where we want it to be collectively, either because there's a couple things I know for trails that haven't got on there, but then also, we just have some unknowns that we're waiting to hear back for, the cost assessments or cost estimates or, the, like site assessment for pickleball and that kind of stuff. There's like, and so I think that's my main message today for us, is that we have 30 days to come up with our best estimate for the CIP, which alone, as we know, is not a budget or is not a commitment either. But I think it's our best foot forward, and I think we'd be good to put our best foot forward there, so.
So do we have this? I didn't go digging.
This, we do not have this.
I didn't think
Will
so.
we get it?
Yeah, we
Have
can,
it emailed to us or something?
Can we have,
yeah, we can send this out, of course.
please?
Summit, we need to talk about the timing. We're kind of talking about the what in the last meeting, and now we talk about the when. Like Victoria said, this is gonna be staged a little bit, only because some of the things that we're talking about can be covered with operational budget.
The dock, swim platform.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, small things, right? The parking lots, the vault toilets, those are kind of the bigger, the only really bigger things that we need to include here on the CIP, right?
Yep.
The swim platform and the police, are we,
Oh, maybe the swim platform, that's
Yeah.
about 10 grand, right?
No, I think that would be,
Oh, is it? Okay,
especially if there was a grant with it.
okay, great.
okay.
So what's left is basically the toilet and I think that 2024, 2025, one of those 2 years is probably when we'd be looking to do this anyways.
I
So-
would update that, so we
Yeah,
eliminate the playground.
yeah, the word playground's on there a couple
Yeah,
times.
so this is a CIP that was put together
Okay, you'll let it.
beginning of the year, and it's
Yeah.
just been edited throughout the
Okay.
year, so that would be removed.
Yeah.
Can you just take some notes as we go and
Yep.
make sure that we get it cleaned up a little bit?
And
Now that
I'd
you've
like
fixed
to have
picnic
a
table.
chance to look at it before we give any final feedback, but I'd suggest we do something in 2023, so, maybe there's just a plug number of 10 or 20 grand or something.
Sure.
And then,
For summit?
I'm sorry, what did I say?
Yeah.
That's something, yeah.
No,
So-
I just asked. the
Yeah,
question.
so did the consultant give us any idea of an order of magnitude of what that master plan would cost?
We do not have that yet.
Okay.
So we have, 2022, we have the fee for this service,
Yeah.
put together a survey, community engagement, design would be the next step, and I know there's a process to that, maybe that does get moved up to next year.
Yeah, and I would guess that we're close enough before this is finalized for us to know that total number is an order of magnitude close to what we're showing.
I think that was based off of the restrooms on Big Island.
Okay.
Some of these numbers that we're
Yeah.
looking at, what it costs to pave a parking lot, so they may be fairly accurate.
Sure. Well, I don't expect them to be now, but I would
Right.
expect them to be.
It does seem like we could move that up, to have 2023 be no activity seems a little bit, or is that how you-
Well, there are other activities happening next year as well that would impact when these projects are done. So,
So,
again, we don't have a number in 2023, but with our operating budget, could we purchase a dock? Yes. Could we put out the swim buoys? Yes. We could go ahead and start with the tree replacement. We can take on that master plan and start, taking on elements of it immediately.
Would it be possible to put those things in the comments at least, so we are keeping track of it?
Yep.
So like in the comments section, say, like, for 2023, here's what we would wanna do from the funded by the operating budget.
Yeah.
like, I'm assuming there isn't a huge pickleball contingent in the audience. I'm a big, huge fan, but I wouldn't necessarily spend 200,000 on that before I spend anything on Summit. To me,
Yeah.
that's the wrong message, so,
Yeah.
okay.
My suggestion would be, if we're talking about summit, I think you kind of already indicated that, to start with things not only that are small versus, you know, start with bigger stuff, it's
Yeah,
probably easier.
a lot of
so much
people
better.
were complaining about, you know, the security of the beach, so I think that would be one of them.
Security.
I mean, like,
The safety.
The
the
safety.
safety in the beach, cause
Yeah.
the
Oh, gotcha.
boats are
Security.
coming out
Okay.
there all
No,
the time.
fishing and swimming don't mix.
Yeah.
Or what have you.
Right.
But I think about little things too, and it's too
Well,
bad.
I was gonna say, one of the things we did on Big Island that I thought was very effective is we did the early versions of those panels, and we had the master plan right in the park,
Mm.
so that people know that it's coming and
Yeah, I
build
like
that trust, you know, so if we have an approved master plan
Yeah,
and we're doing interpretive panels, that could be something that goes up.
yeah, I like that, that's a great idea.
It may be, I think, I mean, obviously that stuff can be published online as well. My one caution is we know, that this is an area that was donated, you know, by the Dayton family. So when it came to discussing structures being built, et cetera, the development, like more hardscape or even a vault toilet, I think, that's something that maybe those smaller incremental things, the trail leads the ropes wing, the beachfront area, amending or taking care of somebody else over here. I'm sorry, you're still here, I thought everyone left. Plantings, that kind of thing.
I don't know why I haven't left, I don't know, I don't
No,
know.
that's okay, I thought.
I'm asking myself.
The idea of doing things that are clear, have clear respect for the history of the land. And that's one thing where I guess I have a little concern is as it comes to, what do you say, like placards or whatnot for
Interpretive
donation.
panel.
Not
Oh,
interpretive
you're
panel,
talking about
donation.
the I gave money type.
Right,
Yeah.
and I've seen those
Yeah.
at Big Island. It's a different situation here, given that it's Dayton land, because what I know and what we've been briefed on by folks who know the Daytons are better than I do, which is
Yeah.
not at all, that Mr. Dayton didn't want his name on anything. That was very important to him. I think that's the one area where I say we might want to take caution in terms of allowing that particular part to bear anyone's name.
Yeah, that's good.
But I mean, obviously, anonymous donations for any project are always, you know,
Yeah, that's
it
a
should be
good point.
welcome and honored, so that's my input.
Is there more? Are you gonna scroll or?
Yeah.
I mean, you're just like trying to give us a first.
And Josh, can you make the pickleball more clear that it's also a hockey and skating rink?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Purpose.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think-
can do that.
Thank you.
And the other thing with the pickleball is like, we have some other, golf course things down there
Yeah.
that I think that are all now kind of coalescing together. It's the same
Right
project.
here, picnic shelter, parking lot, kitchen updates. So those would kind of move into that pickleball upgrade.
I would keep the kitchen upgrade separate still.
I would make as
Yeah.
many of them separate as you possibly
But-
I
can.
would too.
But like the picnic shelter and the parking lot and the gas fire pit is kind of.
Yeah, I think, just a suggestion, but I think if you could have the line items be separate, but maybe the location has a sub.
That's good.
So you know that you're budgeting X for the golf course, but you see how it's being distributed. Not to the very smallest amount, but to the extent you have it up there, I think keeping them separate and grouping them by location would be helpful.
Okay.
Keep scrolling.
There's some old ones on there, thus we keep them on there because there's tied to
To the master plan.
the master plan.
Yes.
Wait, so what?
So,
The golf course master plan?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so like the tow rope.
gotcha.
I don't know that it's ever gonna happen, but because it's referenced in the master plan, we put it way out there to 2032. Into,
This is just a view, so I will send it out to everyone, but please stop me if there's something you'd like to chat about.
Josh, before we go detail,
Yeah.
could you almost like scroll to the bottom and show us what the totals are each year? Cause I'm a little vague on how we look at the available capital resources relative to then how we prioritize with that. So, and I can't read that, but
per year, right?
Yes.
Yeah, can you just kind of tell us what those
It's
are?
the
just for
122, 413,
It's our expenditure
165, that one.
from the park fund. Yeah, the expenditure,
Yeah, I think that's the total.
So the expenditure line is the total.
yes.
So for 2013, you're kind of in the 400 range. In 2023, in 2024, you're
Drops down to 165.
65, and then what's the next year?
810, and
So
that
what?
That's because of
Hackberry.
And is that realistic that we would even be able to consume that amount of capital dollars in terms of what could be accomplished in a single year?
We have years where there are large projects and then funding, whether that's grants will make a big impact on that. But that's why this next year is pretty important. We had quite a few new items pop up. Some disappeared, some were moved back into 2032. But yeah, this is, for the Park Commission, you have some important decisions to make.
And I think that's important because, when you have a major project like that out on, the horizon, getting some of those other things accomplished before that is important, right? Because those are gonna be major competing things. So I think it's important that when we talk about the capital plan, we say, here's the big goals each year, and this is why that order makes sense, right? So can you just sort of make an observation about 23, 24, 25, and why you think that order of whatever the top two is each year kind of makes sense, that they would not in themselves be the right project, but why that order of projects makes sense, just so we kind of have a little context for
Sure. For next year, it's all about pickleball and hockey usage.
And I will also say, this is us, this isn't just Josh, right?
Yeah.
Josh
No,
is
I'm
summarizing,
just
but-
asking him to help us interpret
Yeah.
it by telling a story about it rather than just looking at numbers. The numbers
Yeah.
don't help me as much as understanding there was the thinking behind the numbers.
For next year, we did have some things on there. We did have some of those golf course improvements, and that was the picnic shelter, gas fire pit, things like that. Summit Beach was in there. I think we had $100,000 set aside for that, for the playground when that was the idea for the park. So we were trying to forecast that. That has moved, and now really the big focus has become pickleball. The golf course kitchen update is a real important aspect, and so a lot of it is just located in one park, but it serves many different rooms.
So it might be good, as we tell the story, to say 2023 is really about the golf course as a center of activity for the community, right? That includes these things. So it helps us understand that it's really about what we're trying to achieve with the golf course. And that's how pickleball ended up at the golf course, because what we were trying to achieve at the golf course, not the other way around. It wasn't, hey, we're gonna do pickleball, by the way, it's gonna be at the golf course. It was, here's what we'd like to do with the golf course. This would be a great way to accomplish that with skating and the pickleball. And I think that just provides a better context for why next year and why the golf course and why it's a multi kind of purpose plan. So now that makes sense for me. So now let's go to 2024. So assuming that were to flow that way, then what becomes a priority for 2024?
Summit Beach and Hackberry. Summit Beach would be more of the implementation of the master plan, or at least the developments of it, and then Hackberry would be the beginnings of that master plan.
So it's a planning year.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So 24 becomes a planning year.
We do, so again, for pickleball, some of the goals that were set out were 3 potential pickleball sites, and it wasn't necessarily a pick one and the other 2 disappear. It was, let's pick a test or have a pilot and see how that goes, and then implement maybe 2 more sites. So we do see pickleball coming in. That number's extremely, oh, that's just a design. So yeah,
So it's
24.
planning
Yep, everything's,
So why not more planning in 2023 for things to be executed in 2024? So why does 2024 just become a plan year, is just my question.
I think because of the cost of next of what we'd be putting into these places.
Okay, so it's to spread the capital spend, so I think that's an important thing for us to say, it's kind of a year to breathe, spread the capital,
Yeah,
then,
honestly, it's also spreading staff's time.
yeah.
You know, I mean, they can only handle one big project per year too.
So I think those kind of should be the headlines before you see numbers,
Sure.
is, this is the major story, focusing on the golf course, 2 major or 3 major goals when it comes to what makes that a year-round resource for the community. And then this idea that we're pacing staff, we're pacing the budget, we go into a planning year, and then that positions us for 2025 being,
That's where we see Hackberry, that's really the big focus. Now, this is something that we have yet to develop within the Park Commission. We don't have a master plan, we don't really have a whole lot going for that. So we still have that budgeted for next year to start some of that planning. That could, I guess, see where that goes from there.
Yeah, that's
And
still
these are just
doable.
numbers that we've
Yeah, I mean, okay, so, I like your narrative idea, and that's how we've talked about it too, especially a couple of years ago, like, we had, Big Island was a big push, and then, and we had some other projects, before that, Sawyer Hill, and whatever, and then, now, the next big project that we were looking towards was Hackberry, and that was, the timeline for Hackberry was this guy, and our best estimate of when he's moving out of the house at Hackberry. And so we said, so sitting here a year ago, we said, all right, we got just through a tranche of bigger projects, including, most notably Big Island last year, and then now what's next? Well, the next big milestone is Hackberry. In between here and Hackberry, we're going to do some medium-sized projects like Summit and some stuff at the golf course. So that was the narrative last year, just so you know. The narrative now turns a little bit because now we've had this interest in pickleball and how that ties in with what we're doing, what else we're doing at the golf course, and so forth. So
It might be helpful to look back on this too, and just have, say, over the last 10 years, what was the annual spend and what were those big ticket projects?
Actually, do you have those as columns still? I seem to remember seeing that in the
I don't have that on this document.
It would be not that hard to pull out that historic reference. So
So
we used to
quickly,
see
you could
that.
say, if the last 10 years, average spend per year, and a down year is 100 grand, and we pop up and big
Yeah, I
years.
think there are a lot of things that kind of create this narrative. As I remember looking back over those historic years, by far the biggest element was the development fund that we were collecting. So that the income providing revenue to parks is what drove that narrative. We've been around for a long time. A sub-narrative, so in terms of trails, and this I think is really kind of applies to everything. We have a comprehensive plan with a massive park section in it that we all worked really hard on like 5 years ago that says, this is our vision for the next 10 years. I bet the word pickleball is not in there. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean we don't do pickleball. But then for trails, I look at that comprehensive plan every year and we create our goals and our top priorities. So the first thing I'm gonna do when this hits my email box is pull out the goals for the top 10 trails from our trail committee and say, are we making progress in the right order? And that doesn't apply to everything, but I think there's about 4 different ways to think about it, including the one you said. So the problem is the CIP, is getting put together now, and we just don't know all of those things. We don't have enough time.
Yeah, and the other,
We do the best we can.
Also with the narrative, I would say, is let's go further back, which is, Parks Commission didn't even exist. I mean, that is, here's a historian, but the emphasis and the importance of parks in this community was just not there, right? And we've made, I mean, pat ourselves on the back, we've made some really good progress. And so even if you look 5 years ago, I don't think that the emphasis or the importance was the same as it is today. And if you talk to Denny and Victoria and the other city council, they're like, this is great. You guys have made great progress. There's been some great successes that everyone is happy about. Let's continue doing those.
Well, there was a park commission, and then it was dissolved, and it went away for 10 years. And then it was resurrected. So really and truly, what you've seen now is so much more than what was happening. Our parks were literally neglected.
When did it get reinstated?
Probably
2000.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
2014 maybe?
That's about right.
I don't know, I should know, because I've been on it since then.
Yeah. I came on right after.
But time flies.
Yeah, sure does.
And which does the Orono City Council approve? Is it just the 2023, or is it the 5-year plan? So what do they actually approve coming up?
So, yeah, the CIP, for the Park Commission, you're helping sculpt this, but there's not a vote on it that this is what we are approving, this is just,
We're
we
recommending.
back this.
Yes.
That goes to city council, and then they would look at 2023 and approve that. But then, as each project comes up, we still need to bring that to city council.
So the out years that we're talking about today really just provide context for the city council that we haven't forgotten about these other things.
Correct.
These priorities are not here and now, with the understanding that we're headed in this direction. And that's just what I wanted to understand
Yeah.
was, you know,
And for the
determining the path of the plan that needs to happen.
Yeah.
If you're gonna spend 200 grand on something in 2023, you're gonna spend 20 or 30 or 40 grand
Yeah.
years ago.
But it's also, it's communicating to the city council, but it's also communicating to the residents of Orono, like this is what we're thinking about in, 10 years from now.
It's like a capital improvement program.
So if this got given to us, what's the process? Do we have a
Changes.
regular meeting?
And cities.
In November.
We have a regular meeting.
Okay, so
That's when we need
to
to,
just talk about it openly at that meeting and give our feedback and then it goes.
I think between now and then, in our subcommittees, we talk about it, so that we are hitting the ground running
Okay.
on November meeting.
so we should see a revised number or a revised document based upon the input when we look at it in November. We shouldn't be seeing this exact same document again in November because we should be feeding.
Yes,
And do we
Well,
have guidance that we
I
can
do
even
think it
afford?
I do think it should be a discussion point for the group, though. A subcommittee can't necessarily say, well, this is going to happen, and then that's when the group finds out.
yeah, it would be, we would talk about the changes that we're the subcommittee's proposing in November.
Okay.
And do we have guidance that we can even afford this from the development fund and otherwise? Is $400,000 in 23 something we can afford?
We
It
do that?
is,
Huh?
It is what?
something that we can afford, but
We also have to look at that, we're going to be, there are many items that will get grants to go out and
Yes.
do. So we do have to think about that some of these projects are grant.
The Island Park, they probably spent $850 overall and the city spent $137, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's an extreme example.
Don't
If you
forget,
could notice the development portion of it, I mean, we're entering a slower period in
It's been
construction and
so
development,
far.
so I think it'd be good to keep an eye on.
Right,
Maybe that might not be as robust as it's been in the past.
yeah, and I think we have to assume that.
And we, Big Island Legacy is turning into Orono Parks Legacy, and so there's still gonna be a fundraising partner.
Yeah.
And actually, on that front, I really like the maybe it's like, I know the Science Museum, for instance, you know, like, they do all of their fundraising drives around a theme. So it's kind of like, a couple years ago, it was the year of the engineer, and they had programming and fundraising, like corporate fundraising and sponsorships associated with engineering. One was water, you know.
That's a good point, because I would love the theme around 2023 to be healthy communities, because that's what pickleball is entirely about.
Yeah.
And that's what the fundraising should be about. And, you know, we should be reaching out to, you know, organizations that support healthy communities, whether that be local health plans, or, you know, people who do matching grant for that purpose. So I would love to meet with whomever from the 401c3 to just do a little brainstorming around the narrative, around what are possible ways we might approach fundraising, so that come November, we're not waiting to build that narrative, but it's a part of putting the budget forward, is to say, here's how we would approach fundraising to support this as well. I think the two have to go together.
They go together.
When it's presented.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that we know how much we'll raise, but I believe that there's gotta be people we can talk to say, and this is just a random example. How much does the Hockey Association make when they have a pancake breakfast? Just curious. Is it $5,000 or is it $1,000 or is it $10,000? What happens when you do a silent auction? Just so we have an idea of the potential for fundraising, right? So then you later decide, well, what is the best approach? But I think being able to describe the kind of fundraising that has been done in our community by pickleball groups. You know, this pickleball group in, you know, the Lafayette Club raised this amount of money, and this is how they did it, right? And So- don't you have a person from Wayzata that did the fundraising for the pickleball court for Wayzata Country Club? Carolyn Melberg, Yeah, is the one that talked about him, so that would be excellent for you to interface with them, because they know exactly how to do a fundraiser. So while we're waiting for those cost estimates, I think if we could start the conversation, so we've got the relationships and we've started the narrative, it's gonna make it easier when we do get the information we need to say, they're fitting together naturally at that last minute when we're into November, we've gotta start putting it together.
And we are, just to give everybody a heads up, we're hoping to bring actual presentation material in November to just open the conversation publicly about the future of this fundraising partner. Just because, you know, it's not gonna set its own priorities. It's really responsive to what the city and park commission are putting forward. Primarily because it's not a political organization, it's a support organization. So it's really to enhance the ability to implement the adopted goals. So we want to make sure that everybody understands what the role is, and then kind of how the public is going to be able to interact with that and support some of these goals as they come forward. So.
Is it okay if I vote?
Yes.
I just like to see Orono not try to become Maple Grove or Plymouth and become a jet-setting, busy little place. Orono has a very special place in the community in this entire metro. It's unique.
Okay.
My parting gift.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to what I have to
thank
say.
you.
No
Appreciate it. I don't know everybody.
Thanks for coming.
I can't read that far away.
Neither can we.
So I don't know what you're looking at, but I don't even know what CIP. I'm from industry. CIP means clean in place. Stainless steel cleaning for manufacturing.
Capital improvement plan.
Comprehensive improvement.
Capital improvement.
Yeah.
Big stuff.
Well, it was also a noisy place where I work, so anyway.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I trust you're solid, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying a few things for me. Appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Bye.
So I was just gonna say, all of this conversation, it would be amazing if we had it sort of figured out a year from now. Like this thing in the next, this is 30 days we're talking about getting this done. We just have to do the very best we can. But all those ideas about weaving together a narrative and looking back at the comprehensive plan and tying it to fundraising and knowing what our budget is, that's not gonna happen in the next 3 months.
No.
So,
It's gonna take time.
awesome ideas.
I agree.
But I think we should think about that as we go into next year, so we lay out our calendar in such a way that we're not saying that again in October of 2020.
I agree.
And I completely agree, and I think especially with the nonprofit and its pivot,
Yeah.
it's gonna take, I mean, I agree, I think it's gonna be a year of evolution and just getting out there in the public and building the board, recruiting and setting up the stories and possibly even having a relationship contractually with the city. I mean, if you look at a lot of these nonprofits that have to support parks initiatives, you know, a lot of them have a contractual relationship, so that there really is an obligation to serve the public interest. And I mean, who knows? But we don't have any of those answers today.
But that's really important, because Brian, you were saying to me that we need to have some idea about what different groups could raise relative to the capital plan. And if I was interpreting what you were saying right, it's possible that that group might not be able to raise any funds in the next 12 months.
It's possible.
And if that was the case, then that's zero, right? And then we're saying, okay, what are our other alternatives? So I think it's really important that we get together and we have that conversation, so that for November, we can not be wishy-washy about it, but be very definitive in saying, this is or is not a source of funds to support this. Because we don't want to imply there's going to be funding that's not there.
That's right. We do not want to do that.
What I'm hearing you say is assume zero for 2023.
I would say that's a safe bet, and probably likely, because it's gonna take time to establish the organization and to draw the people who can, you know, actually raise those funds. I will tell a story that I told earlier today, which is, you know, I was just mentioning Millennium Park Foundation because they had such an amazingly successful, I mean, they had a $256 million park to build, and, you know, a relationship with the city, and the city came in for some of that, or, you know, through the parking revenue and things like that, but they raised so much private money, and the way they started, I mean, they're a tiny organization. They are just a board and with a contract property manager, it's a small board, and it was really about offering, the first fundraising initiative was for founders, you know, founders of the organization. So if you gave $1 million, you were a founder of the organization, and you would forever be credited as a founder of Millennium Park. And so, you know, a lot of people came to kind of support the mission of arts and culture at the center of Chicago, and then they were up and running because they were able to hire staff, they were able to, you know, kind of just do so much more than they would have if they had only focused on a capital campaign for a specific thing. It was about the mission, and it was about the story of arts and culture at the center of the city. And it's, of course, it's like become an incredibly important place for art. You know, some of the most important works of art, familiar works of art, were commissioned. And, you know, this is a different place. This is more rural. This is more quiet. It's a different kind of resource. So it's a different story, but you still might have a lot of people who want to participate in that story, the story of Orono. So that's the story we need to find.
So is, other than the Hockey Association, which has its own formal structure through which it can raise funds, is there any other vehicle that we as a city can use in 2023? Or is the Orono Hockey Association the only option for fundraising right now?
Well, there's grants, have been grant
And so
programs.
who then, under whose umbrella does that fall? Does that fall under us as the committee to go out and seek the grants, or is there an official vehicle through which we do that?
We can do it. I know some of us have some experience. I know Adam has some experience as well.
Adam has done them.
Yeah, staff did it almost
Staff did it.
exclusively for Big Island.
For big audits.
Because what I'd like to do is do a little research around that before November.
Yeah, those things are usually more than a year trajectory also.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily be able to budget in November for a grant that comes in 2023. You could plan on applying for grants in 2023, but not necessarily assume you're gonna get.
And I assume that when you're dealing with a capital plan, you can't say, we're gonna spend this, but we're gonna get funds to pay for it in the following year through these activities. You simply have to budget to spend this. And then anything you raise after that might be if you do a phase 2, right? Okay, all right, I just wanna make sure I got the logistics of fundraising relative to spending, clear, so it's gonna be important.
I mean, there are grants that are reimbursement based, where you spend it and then get reimbursed later.
Well, I understand, but
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is unlikely that we get a grant approved for 2023, so that could go against the capital budget of 2023.
No, I think there's some, yes,
Okay.
we have gotten some.
Yeah.
And you have a deadline to get it in, and staff has written the grant, and we have gotten the money. So that's not, what you're saying is not necessarily the way it goes.
Well, and I just wanna understand where time is of the essence.
Yeah.
That if
Oh,
we're not
yeah.
talking about it, we're acting on it. So I will motivate things to happen when I know they're going to have an effect. I just need to understand logistically, it's not through the 401c3, I now understand that. It's something staff helps with, but it's something that, did I say 401?
401k.
It's your 401k.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, I got confused with my 401k. Okay, that was very helpful in clarifying kind of the funding side of it that I didn't have clear before.
Cool. Anything else on this, the CIP review?
I just had a question about we had talked last, or actually, I had mentioned last time, I wonder if we could do a paint the pavement or some, inexpensive way to make that County Road 19. Where we're gonna have a trail, but it's not gonna be built because the county needs to wait until the conditions are bad enough to rebuild the whole corridor, but could we do something in the meantime? There's people walking and biking and cars whizzing by, they've got the water main project, some delineation of non-vehicle space.
So we could work with them, that's not a decision we could make.
Yeah.
Because it's a county road, but yeah, certainly we could reach out to them.
Yeah.
I'll put it on my list, Kirsten, because I was gonna do exactly what I said, look at the comp plan, look at our goals, check the CIP, let the 3 or 4 of you know what I'm thinking, and I'll put that. I think it's pretty near the top of our list, so.
Yeah, that is such a busy and well-used little strip, but yeah, you really feel like they're whizzing by.
Yeah.
On 19.
Even maybe just connecting that new
I live right
residential
up in there, and it's amazing, even just getting out.
Yeah. And yet, so many people using it, it's just.
Well, and when you turn into our streets, that's, cars wanna go around, well, they can't, the barrels are there, bikes, they're trying to navigate inside the barrels, and it's, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's kind of scary.
It is a little scary right now, but yeah, it's a highly desirable corridor, so.
Okay, so anything else in the CIP, and then I'll wrap it up.
Not for you.
So I will, I'm going to try and talk to you guys and contact you about the different things on the CIP to make sure that we are in a good place by November, so. All right, staff updates, Josh.
Okay, I've been gone the last 9 days, so I know many of you sent emails. I will get to them, apologize, but just got back from Boundary Waters. Great.
Cool.
Great.
Okay, staff updates, we have Crystal Bay Playground. We And then we'll have to do a site restoration. We'll be doing that throughout the fall and probably into the spring a little bit. Just some general cleanup. It worked out well. There's a lot of weeds in that playground, so it's a good chance to start over. Really excited about the equipment going in. Today is a huge victory for our Parks Department and I would say the city of Orono. We got the vault toilets pumped out of Big Island.
Yes.
We do have an inspection at the lower toilet, that's scheduled for next week. I'm concerned that there may be some fault with it, but we'll have that checked out so we know for sure. They are not the 2,500 gallon tanks that we were told, they're 1,000 gallon tanks. So, a little smaller than we had hoped, but, so Public Works and Parks employees worked really hard today to get that done. The guys did a really good job. It was a really physical task, so if you ever see those guys around, thank them, because it's a great park. It's great that people will be able to use it. So those toilets will be open.
Awesome. Great job.
Yeah, tell them thanks. I'm there at least once a week. It's amazing. We still need to do something to make sure that the cruisers aren't dominating the docks, but
Yeah, we've been working on signage. We've had that out. The police chief and I, we met with the water patrol earlier this summer. Has not made much of an impact.
Well,
So
no,
we'll
actually,
keep
I think it
looking.
did. I think it was going pretty well there for a while. And
Okay.
it got bad again.
Okay.
Hopefully, so I think we can figure it out.
Yeah, we'll keep working on that. Over the weekend, we had golfer appreciation / Oktoberfest at the golf course. And this really was marketed to the users of that park. And then we had one the following year and that kind of went out to the whole community. It wasn't a great turnout. This really was focused on the users of that golf course. Everyone enjoyed their time there and didn't bring in a whole lot of money, but a lot of value to the customer, to the resident. So I'm happy to see that happen.
Great.
Next Wednesday, October 12th, from 5 to 7 p.m., we have the Antoine Park listening session. So, will you be there?
I'll be there.
Yeah, okay, I'll be there. So, we don't really have anything planned. If you look on the CIP, we did have something in 25 for Antoine for playground replacement. It's actually one of our nicer playgrounds. I don't anticipate it to be replaced then, but just Lisa kind of helped develop a great model for listening to the residents of a specific area. So that will be occurring next Wednesday for Antoine. And then last is, we heard about it tonight, next Thursday, October 13th, is the Summit Beach Open House here. I don't have the time, do you?
Maybe. I'll
It's on
cover
our
that in
website.
the update.
That's it for staff update.
Cool.
Thank you.
Commissioner updates. We'll go around the horn here.
I think I've done that.
Good.
You got an email from a resident
Yep.
about Sandy Beach. They were discussing, he was wondering who was going to pick up the weeds. They have, the neighborhood does rake up the weeds, but they didn't get anybody to pick them up. So I did reach out to him and tell him once that they rake the leaves to please contact me. And then I'll be the intermediary and let you know, okay? And that we definitely, the city definitely will pick them.
Yes.
And that's all I got as far as the beaches.
Great. Thank you.
Big Well Subcommittee's gonna try to meet next week, waiting for
Yeah.
the,
I thought it was tomorrow. It was next Tuesday.
well, that's how I interpreted
Okay.
Cameron's
All right.
comment, let me reread it.
Okay.
I wanted it to be this week, but when I read his comment, so I'll have to reread that. So we'll be meeting either tomorrow or next week. And so of course we're waiting for do we call them engineers, the planners?
Yeah, Boulder and Mink, we are still waiting for them. The lead guy on that just got back from Europe, so he's putting together his team to start working on that.
Okay. And we need to talk about the survey. Talk about
Yes.
doing a survey, so thought we maybe could put together some thoughts about potential questions. And then my next thing was just trying to understand the fundraising piece. So I'll reach out to Jay Schwingler and just find out a little bit more of John, find out a little bit more about, what kind of fundraising they've done in the past and how successful they've been, and, you know, timing of when they would actually engage if we were to do something. And then I think, you know, in light of the conversations today, I think I will reach out to some other folks to see, what kind of grants maybe other groups have done, to see if we can kind of focus more on the grant route rather than the 501c3.
And if there is like a grassroots community initiative, just, I mean, the entity exists, so, you know, we don't have to have the whole thing fully formed before it can serve a purpose, you know.
Okay, so if we did find people within the community who said, yeah, we would put together a fundraising, initiative, we can use it as a vehicle.
Yes.
You just need people who would staff it and organize it.
Yep.
It could provide guidance in terms of appropriate fundraising so that they're not getting themselves into trouble.
Well, I mean, this is where I would say we would have to rely on the city, and this is where it comes up, is there some form of agreement? Because until the entity actually has sufficient resources to staff itself, which it currently doesn't, then we would be depending on you. And I don't know kind of what, that we would have to sort that out, so that might be a first step, is just considering
that's potentially viable to, through the city, do fundraising with a grassroots group or not?
I don't know, but I can look into it.
Okay.
I know that it is. I mean, I guess for City of Orono, we would have to figure that out. But for instance, the nonprofit I'm working with the City of Minneapolis, they have a signed memorandum of understanding. And the nonprofit is serving not only as kind of a fundraising entity, but actually is giving money to the city as a cost sharing partner in some studies. So in that case, it just required the city to pass a resolution to receive the donation. And I mean, it all has to be it's very, you know, it's guided by the policies and laws of Minnesota, but it's possible for a particular purpose, you know, to receive funds. And so, I don't know, I mean, that would be, again, it's like, well, what does that look like in this case? Might be different, but it certainly is possible in this.
I do think you need a memorandum of understanding, as I remember.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
The other thing is, I was the chair of that committee for a while, so, I think almost exclusively we used it as a way for people to give money to the project. So if anybody wants to give $10,000 or $100,000, they can do this tax-free, and it'll go into the project of the city, so they can use it as a tax deduction, which without that, there's no other way. So if you wanted to raise a lot of money fast, I would absolutely go that route versus the fundraiser route. Find people who are willing to support the project, tell them. Because most people wouldn't know that they could give money to a city for a park and get a tax deduction.
And that's the new thing about having this now.
Yeah.
is that
Well, we used
if
it
you,
for
if you can donate to anything within the city through the 501.
Yeah,
Right.
we could do that right
Yeah.
now, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe, you know.
So we do have the infrastructure to receive contributions.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
We have the mailbox and the 501(c)(3) and all the infrastructure.
And the ability then to deliver to them an acknowledgement of their contribution.
Exactly.
Okay.
What we would have to figure out though, because it isn't a sole purpose fundraising entity anymore, and not just for one park, how we would have to code those, if those donations were for a
Exactly.
specific purpose.
Yeah, so they'd be like a
They have
designated
some
fund.
accounting work to do.
They'd have to indicate that it's a designated
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah. So it's not quite ready, but it could be. So it's just, we've got a lot of homework to do probably with you guys and then, you know.
Okay.
Elisa.
Well, I've been busy. I don't know if most of you know by now, but I'm running for city council. So I've been doing a lot of door knocking, and I should just tell you that as that process, I asked about a lot of things, and I will offer again that people move here for the open space and nature. So I just think it's always good to keep in mind that residents who aren't necessarily coming to meetings for one thing or another have a lot of opinions about the land. And on that note, it was very cool at the listening session at Casco that one resident who lives out there had a whole timeline. Remember her, this lady had kept a timeline of this entire history of the park with pictures and maps back when they were doing like horse-drawn carriages, etc. And she contacted me over the weekend, or I should say we were talking over the weekend, and all of that will be going to the Western County Historical Museum. And I was over there actually today, and I can just tell you that these conversations, the rapid fire nature in which change is made in this day and age is like in really stark contrast to when you go spend time in the museum and see how long changes happen over time. And I think it's just good to keep in mind and be humble as, you know, the people that we are serving this community, because it's very humbling when you look back on that much history and the people who come before us and all the, you know, effort and the history of the city. So it was a really great experience, and it ended well. The timeline will be well received over there. So
Good, great.
That's what I'd like to share.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's see, I have been trying to get to know the park system since I'm a fairly new resident, I think, compared to all of you. Just been here a couple of years. So I was out at Big Island over the weekend and also at Lurton Dog Park. And I actually had a spark of an idea at Lurton Dog Park because I was out there with my dog and my daughter. And on our journey, somehow, I thought I was being smart. I didn't want to carry a bag, and so I had my credit card and a $50 bill in my back pocket, which I lost on the walk. And didn't realize it until we got back to the car. And when I went back in, you know, we you know, kind of retraced our steps to look for it, and I was asking every person that we passed by, did you see a credit card? Did you find any cash? By the way, we found it. It was a miracle. We found both. But it occurred to me that for these occasions, a little bucket for lost and found would be a nice feature of the park. Because people can lose a toy or, you know, whatever. Like, maybe they don't all drop $50.
That's a great idea.
But, you know, just, yeah. So.
So if you're short on cash, swing by there.
Yeah, swing by the lost.
See the visit.
And the other thing I thought is that pump could use some WD-40. Oh man, that thing was sticking up a storm.
Oh, no, really?
Just a little, maybe a little squirt.
The what?
The pump.
The pump, yeah.
Wow.
And we are planning, the little 501c3 group is planning to visit the golf course. We just want to understand, none of us have really looked at the site for the proposed pickleball. So we just want to get a sense of it. But what our conversation has been is we're going to wait for the city, and, I mean, on all these things, we're going to wait for the city and the park commission and for something to be an actual adopted priority with funding, and then we would kind of help to support. So, but we still want to understand what it's all about.
Great.
I don't have a whole lot to update as far as specifics on rounds and how the club's performing. I'll defer to Josh on that, but we are meeting our little subcommittee group this Wednesday morning just to kind of do a look back on the summer and just see how things went and talk about ideas for next year on a number of levels. So, but everything I can tell, it's been a good summer out there.
Yes, yeah, we did lose that entire month of April, so that was difficult from a revenue standpoint. But throughout the summer, we made up from that loss of April and even increased revenue from last year. So September ended a little early for us, just with the weather, but October's going great so far. All 3 days of it.
Can you send me the data for September? Thanks. Great. That open house next Thursday is 5:30, 7:30 here.
5:30 to 7:30.
Yep. Is what it's scheduled for. I just want to thank everyone. I think this was a great meeting, and I really appreciate everyone's contributions tonight and always. It's cool to just sit back and hear everyone's different perspectives and expertise and experiences. I love that this group is together, and I thank you guys for your contributions. So that was it. don't have any breakout session scheduled, so I think we're adjourned, right?
Okay, that's the question.
Yeah, I spoke with him earlier today while we were,
How you doing, Gordy?
Good, Rick, how are you?
Good.
Oh, he's a doctor.
yeah, yeah.
He's
Sent down to Verdict a couple times in the last month. Where it's just like the images that we've been on there. I mean, it's full of people. Are you in that building?
Right.
Yeah.
I tell people that this is like
Came down.
the only project I've ever
His
done
daughter
where
was on
the
the
rendering
Olympic team.
Yeah, right.
people,
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
all the people that you.
And she's back here now.
Yeah.
Now
We had afternoon meetings.
Brenda,
Last
years
Monday, I guess.
Yeah.
Walking through the lobby.
Well, they let her know that you were just.
This is the cool place.
Every single day.
Right in front of our street.
And even
So I got all the insight from them, you know, when it's gonna be finally, heard a lot about it.
Are you gonna have a trail access?
So,
Oh, he's.
Well, they were both.
yeah,